The air smelled of damp rain. The gentle drizzle tapping against Alex's windows usually brought a sense of calm, but not tonight. Tonight, there was no calm. Alex was alone in the house, a house that, just a week ago, had been filled with the laughter of his brother, Michael, who was now nothing more than a framed photograph. Michael had died in a tragic accident. Alex glanced at Michael's picture on the wall. Michael's smile seemed almost alive in that photograph. His hands trembled. He whispered to himself, "It's just exhaustion, just a bad dream." But deep inside, something told him this was not the end. The night dragged on slowly. The clock on the wall struck 2:33 a.m., and then everything went silent. Even the rain stopped. Suddenly, the ticking of the clock resumed, but this time it was louder. His heartbeat now matched its rhythm. Alex decided to head to his bedroom, but before he could touch the doorknob, he heard a faint rustling noise coming from the living room. Something was there. Alex hesitated, taking a few steps toward the noise. It felt as if an invisible force was pulling him towards it. He stood at the entrance to the living room. Darkness consumed the space, but there was something more, an unnatural chill in the air. He wrapped his arms around himself, shivering, and stepped forward. The dim moonlight filtered through the window, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. Michael's framed photograph was now on the floor, the glass shattered as if someone had thrown it. Alex bent down to pick it up, but as he looked at the photo, an icy wave of fear washed over him. Michael wasn't smiling anymore. His face was cold, emotionless, as if he were alive but no longer human. This isn't real. My mind is just playing tricks on me. Alex spoke aloud, hoping to quiet his fear. Suddenly, soft footsteps echoed in the room, like someone trying not to be heard. Alex whipped around, but there was no one there. He quickly switched on the light, but even the light couldn't dispel the heavy, dreadful feeling that hung in the air. The shadows continued to dance in the corners of the room. His eyes darted back to the frame. The photo of Michael was now gone. The frame was empty. Suddenly, a voice, one he recognized, came from behind him. Michael's voice. His voice was just as it had sounded when he was alive. "Alex!" Alex turned around quickly. Michael was standing there, but not as he remembered him. His face was pale, and his eyes were black, empty voids. He stretched out his hands toward Alex. "Help me!" Michael's voice barely escaped his lifeless lips. Alex wanted to scream, but no sound came out. His throat felt tight, as if something was stuck in it. Michael stepped closer. Every step he took made the floor vibrate slightly beneath Alex's feet. "You're dead. You shouldn't be here." Alex's voice trembled as he spoke. Michael's hollow eyes locked with Alex's, his voice barely a whisper now. "I'm dead, but I'm still trapped here." Alex couldn't move. His body felt frozen in place. Michael was now standing right in front of him, his cold hands wrapped around Alex's neck. A deathly chill spread from Michael's fingers into Alex's body. "You have to help me. I don't want to stay here." His voice, once a whimper, now grew into something angry and filled with sorrow. Alex, with all the strength he could muster, stepped back. His voice cracked as he asked, How can I help you?" Michael went silent for a moment. Then, a dark and horrifying whisper echoed through the room. "You have to send someone in my place, someone from our blood." Alex stumbled back in horror. "No, I can't." But before he could finish, Michael vanished. The room returned to its normal state. The rain started again, but this time its sound was muffled, heavy. Trembling, Alex moved toward the door. His legs felt like lead. Just as his hand touched the doorknob, the phone rang. The number on the screen made his heart sink. It was Emily, his younger sister. Alex answered, but the only thing he heard on the other end was a weak, familiar whisper. "It's your turn." Lucy had never met her grandmother. Her family avoided the topic of Karen as if her presence in their lives was a dark stain. She wasn't a kind person, was all her mother had ever said. There was no further explanation. Now, standing in the old family house on the outskirts of town, Lucy couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something unfinished lingered here. The old house was enveloped in a suffocating silence. The tall, dead trees outside the window swayed slightly in the wind. Lucy walked slowly through the narrow, dark hallways. The floor creaked under her feet, almost as if the house itself knew she was there. Everything was covered in dust, a testament to years of neglect. A picture of her grandmother, Karen, sat on one of the old wooden tables. The face staring back at Lucy was cold and mysterious, with eyes that seemed to peer through the darkness and into her soul. Why did no one ever talk about her? The question gnawed at Lucy's mind. That night, as Lucy lay in her old bedroom, a sudden noise broke the silence. The sound of something falling. She held her breath and listened intently. The noise came from downstairs, from the kitchen. With a flashlight in hand, Lucy cautiously made her way down the stairs. The silence of the house seemed to grow heavier with each step. The kitchen was dark and still, but when the beam of her flashlight swept over the room, her heart nearly stopped. A wooden chair in the corner was gently rocking back and forth. Lucy took a step back, ready to leave, but suddenly the air around her changed. An unnatural coldness filled the room, chilling her to the bone. Her breath became visible, a mist in the frigid air. "Lucy!" A faint voice came from behind her. She slowly turned. Something moved in the corner of the room. A figure emerged from the shadows, a frail, elderly woman in old-fashioned clothing, her hollow eyes staring blankly at Lucy. "Lucy!" The voice repeated, clearer this time, closer. The old woman shuffled forward, her hands trembling, her face etched with deep lines of sorrow. Lucy barely managed to whisper, Who are you?" "I'm Karen, your grandmother." Lucy stumbled back. "But you're dead. I never met you." Her voice was shaky, filled with confusion and fear. Karen's face twisted with sadness, her black, empty eyes reflecting a pain that seemed endless. "I made many mistakes, and I've come to ask for forgiveness. Only you can grant it." Lucy, still in shock, stammered, "Forgiveness? For what?" Karen took another step forward, her face more withered and haunting than ever. "I betrayed my family, the people I loved. When I was alive, my pride kept me from apologizing. Now that I'm dead, I'm trapped here between this world and the next. Only your forgiveness can set me free." Lucy shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "But I don't even know you. How can I forgive you?" Karen's dark eyes glistened as if a faint light flickered deep within her. "Your blood is my blood. Your forgiveness has power." Lucy wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she couldn't take her eyes off the ghostly figure of her grandmother. But what did you do that needs forgiving? Karen's face crumpled in agony. I destroyed my family. I lied to them. I kept dark secrets that should have never been hidden. Now, with no chance to make things right, my only hope is you. Lucy's shaking hands gripped the edge of the table for balance. Her mind raced. Why should I forgive you? I don't know anything about you. Karen slowly shook her head. Because if you don't, this suffering will continue. Not just for me, for you too. This house, it's trapped. Every night, the darkness grows stronger. Lucy took a deep breath, her hands still trembling. She felt something wrong deep inside, but she couldn't escape the pull of Karen's hollow eyes. What do you want from me? Karen stepped closer, now standing directly in front of her. Just say you forgive me. That's all you need to do. Lucy's heart raced as she struggled to comprehend what was happening. She felt an overwhelming pressure on her chest, as if the house itself was closing in on her. I can't. I don't even know you. Karen's pleading expression quickly twisted into one of anger and despair. If you don't forgive me, this place will be mine forever. Every night, you'll become more like me, trapped in the dark. Lucy gasped. The walls of the house seemed to inch closer, like a suffocating prison. The old home now felt like a cold, soulless tomb. She had to make a decision, and fast. Fine. I forgive you. Lucy's voice was barely a whisper, but as soon as the words left her lips, the air in the room shifted. Something strange began to happen. Karen smiled, her face softening for the first time. Slowly, her figure began to fade into the darkness. But before she vanished completely, her faint voice echoed one last warning. It's never truly over. Lucy stood frozen in the eerie silence that followed. The house now seemed normal again, but deep down, she knew something had changed, something that would never fully go away. Amelia had always been fascinated by the paranormal. One night, she and her friends, Eric and Sarah, decided to perform a spirit summoning as a joke. What started as a simple thrill for the evening soon spiraled into a nightmare they were utterly unprepared for. They chose Eric's old family home for the ceremony, a house that had stood for over a century. On that cold, dark night, they gathered around an old wooden table in the middle of the living room. Candles flickered faintly, casting a shaky glow on the walls. The silence was heavy, with only the sound of their soft breathing breaking the stillness. Amelia held an old, worn book in her hands, glancing at her friends. "Are you all ready?" she asked in a quiet voice. Eric smirked. "It's just for fun. Don't worry." Sarah looked a little uneasy, but nodded in agreement. Amelia began to read the ancient text aloud, her voice calm but tinged with anticipation. The Latin words rolled off her tongue and echoed in the room. When she finished, they sat in silence, waiting. Nothing happened. Eric chuckled. "See? I told you." Suddenly, a faint scratching sound came from the walls. Eric's laughter died in his throat. They all turned their heads toward the noise. The scratching came again, louder this time. Sarah's eyes widened in fear. "What's that?" Amelia listened closely to the walls. This wasn't supposed to happen. Sarah turned to Amelia, her voice sharp. "What do you mean wasn't supposed to happen? What did you summon?" Before Amelia could respond, the candles flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by the rapid beating of their hearts. Eric fumbled for his lighter and managed to ignite a small flame. The dim light revealed their frightened faces. "Amelia, tell me everything's under control." But Amelia said nothing. Her gaze was fixed on a corner of the room, her face pale. The soft scratching sound returned, this time followed by the sound of something breaking through the walls. Eric jumped from his seat. "We need to get out of here." Just then, a tall, dark shadow began to shift and move in the corner. A deep, menacing whisper echoed from the darkness, unlike anything human. Something emerged, an unknown entity with glowing red eyes, moving swiftly toward them. Sarah screamed and stumbled backward. "That's not a spirit. What is that?" Amelia's voice trembled as she spoke. This is wrong. We weren't supposed to summon this. It's an evil spirit." Eric, now panicking, rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard he tried, it was locked tight. "We're trapped." The shadowy figure crept closer, its shape twisted, and its breath heavy and unnatural. Its glowing red eyes radiated pure hatred. Amelia darted to the table, flipping through the summoning book frantically. There must be a way to send it back. There has to be. Her hands trembled, and the words on the page blurred in her panic. Sarah ran to Amelia, her voice shaking with terror. "You have to stop it. Do something now." The shadow closed in, its presence cold and suffocating. Amelia found the page she was looking for and began reading, her voice shaky but determined. From the darkness, you come. To the darkness you shall return. The creature halted, but instead of fading away, a horrific grin spread across its face. "You cannot send me back." Its voice was low, guttural, and full of malice. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't part of the ritual. The being they had summoned was far more powerful and evil than they had ever imagined. She had made a terrible mistake. Eric shouted, "What do we do now?" In a voice barely above a whisper, Amelia answered, "We can't. This entity, it's stronger than anything we can control. We summoned the wrong spirit." The shadow loomed over them now, enveloping the room in an almost tangible darkness. It wasn't here to scare them. It was here to take something it believed it was owed. "By bringing me here, you have given me form," the entity hissed. "Now I belong to this place, and you will belong to me." The walls seemed to close in around them, the darkness consuming everything. As the creature stepped forward, its twisted body seemed to stretch, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. In the final moments, with nowhere left to run, they realized the terrible mistake they had made. The entity was now part of their world, and they were now part of it. Alice and Mark had never imagined that something strange would await them when they bought the old house. It stood on the outskirts of town, with its red brick walls and a beautiful garden, seeming like the perfect place to start their new life. But what was hidden inside those walls was far more than just memories of the past. On their first night after moving in, everything seemed normal. They unpacked their belongings, arranged the rooms, and spent the night peacefully in their new home. However, on the second night, just as they turned off the lights and went to bed, a faint scratching noise echoed from the living room. Mark frowned. It's probably just the wind. Alice shrugged it off as well, but the sound persisted. Mark got up and walked to the living room, but there was nothing. Everything was in its place. Nothing happened until the morning, but when Alice went to the kitchen to grab a cup of water, she noticed something unusual. On the white wall near the kitchen, there were words written in unfamiliar handwriting. "Burn the letter." Alice, startled, called out, "Mark, did you write this?" Mark, still groggy from sleep, stared at the wall in confusion. "What? I wasn't even here last night. Maybe it was left by someone before us." Alice shook her head. "But there was nothing here yesterday." Mark touched the wall. "Maybe it's just old graffiti. Don't worry, we'll paint over it." They spent the day doing household chores and ignored the strange writing. But that night, as they headed upstairs to bed, the scratching sound returned. This time, it was louder and closer. Mark's curiosity piqued, and he went downstairs again. The moment he turned on the light, something strange caught his eye. More words had appeared on the walls of the living room. "I'm trapped here. Find the letter. Burn it." His breath caught in his throat as he scanned the room. There was no sign of anyone else. It was just him and Alice in the house. "Alice, come down here." Alice rushed down, and her face went pale when she saw the walls. "What the hell is this? Who wrote this?" They spent hours trying to figure out the meaning behind the messages, but found nothing. From that night on, more writings appeared each time they went to bed. Every night, the message became clearer and more urgent. "Find the letter." Alice, trembling with unease, said, "I think it's the spirit of the previous owner. Maybe there's something left behind. Maybe it's the letter they're talking about." Though Mark was skeptical, he agreed. The next day, they searched the entire house. From the basement to the attic, they looked for anything resembling a letter, but they found nothing. Until the fifth night, when they finally went to bed, the writing on the walls became frantic, the words larger and more insistent. "Find the letter, burn it, or I will never leave." Mark, now frustrated, shouted, "We can't find anything. Where is it?" At that moment, the lights suddenly flickered off. The oppressive silence settled over them. Alice, her voice shaking, whispered, "Mark, do you think it's really here?" Mark, his hands trembling, approached the walls. Suddenly, he heard a hollow sound as he tapped on one of the old sections. "There's something behind this wall." Grabbing some tools, Mark broke through the wall. Hidden behind it was an old wooden box. When they opened it, they found a letter, aged and yellowed with time. In the letter, it said, "My life ended when this letter was opened. Now you must finish what I could not." Alice's hands shook as she looked at Mark. "Do you think we have to burn it?" Mark, staring at the letter, nodded slowly. "I think this is what the spirit has been asking for." Without hesitation, Alice lit a match and set the letter on fire. The flames quickly consumed the letter, and as it turned to ash, a faint voice echoed from the walls around them. The writing on the walls slowly disappeared. There were no more menacing words. The house fell silent again. Alice, her voice barely above a whisper, asked, "Do you think it's over?" Mark exhaled deeply, nodding. "I hope so. I think it's free now." They stayed awake until dawn, waiting for the scratching noises to return, for new words to appear. But nothing happened. The house was quiet once more. As the sun rose, Alice and Mark couldn't help but wonder what other secrets this house might still be hiding. A house that now seemed peaceful. But was it truly over?